Hello, everyone. I am Lindsay Joseph, the Senior Program Officer for Links at Resolve to Save Lives, and I'd like to welcome you to our SALT Awareness Week webinar. For those of you who may be joining our Links webinar series for the first time, Links was developed in collaboration between the World Health Organization, the CDC Foundation, and Resolve to Save Lives to serve as an online community and resource sharing platform for people working to improve cardiovascular health across the world. Just a few housekeeping details before we begin. We will have 4 presentations with one Q&A session after the first 2 presentations, and then another Q&A at the end. For the duration of the webinar, participants will be muted, but will have the option to type in questions during the Q&A portions of the presentation. We encourage you to use the Q&A button and not the chat feature to ask your questions, and the Q&A button is located at the bottom of your screen. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted on linkscommunity.org. I'll now hand it over to Mary Brown, Program Manager at the World Action on Salt, Sugar, and Health, to tell us a bit more about WASH and to introduce our speakers for today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Hello, everyone, and good afternoon from London. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you all during SALT Awareness Week, our annual public awareness campaign, and thank you so much to Links for organising this webinar to help mark the week. My name is Mary Brown and I'm Programme Manager for WASH. We were set up in 2005 to help translate the success of the UK salt reduction programme to countries around the world. And just last year, we expanded to have a focus on sugar and excess calories. So our work now incorporates all aspects of reformulation, helping countries worldwide to access better quality and healthier food. We have a network of around 600 members in 100 countries, all of whom are experts in hypertension, cardiovascular disease, obesity, kidney disease, public health, or nutrition. And all are actively involved or have a strong interest in reducing salt and sugar intakes in their individual countries. We provide them with the resources and advice needed to enable them to develop and implement salt and sugar reduction programs worldwide. And you can find a lot more information about our active projects in Malaysia, China, and the Eastern Mediterranean region, our research, and about Salt Awareness Week on our website. So now it is my honour to introduce 2 of our WASH members to you. And first, we're going to go to Professor Abdel Fattah Darouche, who is head of the Human Nutrition Research Unit at Hassan II University of Casablanca in Morocco. He has published extensively in the fields of biotechnology and nutrition and is an expert scientific consultant to the Moroccan Ministry of Health. He's been a consultant to the World Health Organization, and he's vice president of the association All With Heart. He's going to discuss salt reduction work in Morocco with a focus on bread, which is the leading source of salt in the Moroccan diet. So Professor Darouche, over to you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. And I start my presentation. Thank you for inviting me to share with you some of our research on reducing salt consumption in Morocco throughout bread. I am Professor Darouche Abdel Fattah from Faculty of Science Belmsik, University Hassan II of Casablanca. As you know, next please. Next slide. Yes, as you know, WHO recommends since the last century a daily salt consumption of less than 50 grams. And more than 75 countries in the world have implemented the National Salt Reduction Action Plan or strategy, which have given encouraging results in several countries like Finland, less of 36% consumption of salt, China 28, Japan 23, and England 14. And reducing salt intake has often been shown to be associated with decreased cardiovascular mortality, like Finland, more 17%. And what about Morocco? In 2010, In our effort to reduce salt consumption in Morocco, we began our process by identifying the main food carrying salt in the Morocco diet. Next, please. Yes. To do this, we have examined the evolution of food consumption over the past 13 years, and it is cereals that are consumed the most. This consumption is estimated at 200 kilograms per person per year, which is the equivalent to 615 grams per day per person, and that more than 17% of the cereal are consumed in the form of bread. This consumption is between 315 and 500 per day. Bread in Morocco is produced either in traditional form by households or professional by bakers. And therefore, bread is the main source of salt in the Moroccan diet. Next, please. Yes. Our goal, our objective is delayed a graduate reduction in the amount of salt in bread in bread preparation by awareness and education bakers about the health risk of consumption of salt, facilitated by collaboration between Hassan, the University of Casablanca, and the National Federation of Moroccan Bakery and Pastry and the city of Casablanca. Next, please. Yes, our first intervention site was Casablanca, which is the largest city in Morocco. Its population is 4.5 million, left on 8 prefectures, and the number of bakers is about 1,000. For the qualification of salt, we collected 116 samples of bread, 18 with salt and 18 without salt. It's the control. As from 18 bakers in the 8 districts of Casablanca, the 10 bakers by district. Samples were obtained from 3 types of neighborhood: wealthy, popular, and mixed. The quality of salt have been realized by the method of Moore. Next, please. Yes. Of our quantification salts, the results showed that the average amount of salt in Casablanca bakers' bread is 17.4 grams per kilogram. It's too high. The distribution, thank you. The distribution of salt used by bakers and by district showed that between 10 and more 18 grams per kilogram of bread, and there was no significant difference between bakers from different neighborhoods. And therefore, we can estimate that the salt intake from the consumption of bread alone is between 6.1 and 8.7 per day per person. After the result, the question was how to act to reduce the salt in the bread. Next, please. Yes. We realized 3 actions. The first action, dissemination of salt, result in bread for National Federation of Bakery and Patisserie, National Minister of Health, WHO, WASH, and by workshop, conference, and meeting. The second action was to sensitize and educate bakers by knowledge, attitude, and behavior questionnaire about the dangers of overconsumption of salt. And 3 action was to train national delegates of the National Bakers and Patisserie, the Federation for educate bakers in different Moroccan cities on the health benefits on the reducing overconsumption of salt. Next, please. Thank you. For the result KAB survey, we sensitize 2018 bakers in 3 stages in the 2012, 2014, and 2016 by the student of Masters in Nutrition of Faculty of Science, University Hassan II of Casablanca. The main result showed that more than 19% of bakers know that overconsumption of salt can cause hypertension. It's the same if the Moroccan people. Only 20% know that overconsumption can cause other diseases, and that between 2012 and 2016, we managed awareness more than 17 of bakers who started or promised to decrease the amount of salt in preparation in the bread in 18 and 12, 16. Next, please. Thank you. The results of monitoring and evaluation of salt reduction in baker bread between 2011 and 2016 showed the amount of salt in bread is 2016 had decreased by 26.4% from the average of 17.4 grams per kilo in 2012 to 20.4 gram per kilogram. The table showed that the mean of salt in the bread of the 8 prefectures of Casablanca were between 14 and 20 grams of salt per kilogram of bread. Next, please. Thank you. This slide showed the average use of salt in 5 cities of Morocco. It varied between 16 and 13%, and therefore lower than the amount of 17.5 obtained in Casablanca in 2011. This result is mainly due to the awareness action of bakers in Morocco by the delegation of the National Bakers and Patisserie Morocco Federation. The next, please. Thank you. I'm sharing with you this slide which compare the result of the National Cardiovascular Risk Factor Survey between 2000 and 27 and show us that the prevalence of high blood pressure decreased from 33 to 89%. Questions? It was part of the decrease in salt consumption in this decrease of hypertension in Morocco. This is a question. Thank you. Please, next. Yes, this is the approach to reduce salt consumption. As you see, there is a partnership like WHO, Minister of Health, WASH, and National Federation of Baker and Patisserie. There is the research with the Minister of Santé. This is our result of research, and we write a document for reducing salt in Morocco. Awareness and communication. We research. We do some emission in television, and we write some papers about the reduction salt in Morocco, and we participate in the week awareness with the WASH in Arabic language. Next, please. Yes, I acknowledgement of partners. The first is WHO. I thank WHO, which supported the project to study the prevalence of salt consumption in Morocco for people over 24 years old, as well as the determination of the concentration of salt and fatty acid and trans acid in 24 traditional Moroccan dishes and 5 types of fast food. The University of Chester, which initiated the study project on the rate of sodium, potassium, and iodine consumption in people between 18 and 24 years old. The Ministry of Health, who accompanied us in our research, the association which all with the heart, with one we work in partnership, the city of Casablanca, which accompany us for intervention on the ground, and our student of master for realizing survey. Next, please. Yes, this is our slot that's indicated less salt, more health in Arabic, in Moroccan Arabic. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that engaging presentation. Just a reminder to everyone on the webinar that if you have any questions for our speakers, please pop them into the Q&A box. And after our next presentation, we're going to have a question and answer session. But before that, I'm now going to hand over to Professor Susanna Shahar, who is Dean of the Faculty of Health Sciences at the National University of Malaysia. She has vast experience of nationwide health surveys and has sat on various committees leading to the development of national nutrition guidelines. She is a co-researcher of the MyCost study, which determines salt intake and sources of salt in the Malaysian diet. And she's heavily involved in the national strategy to reduce salt intake, which has successfully brought together the Ministry of Health, academics, researchers, and the food industry. Professor Shahar will now present to us on her new project, which is tackling salt levels in the out-of-home sector. Welcome, Professor Shahar.
Thank you so much, Mehari, for your kind introduction. Hi. Yeah, I'm so pleased to share with all of you tonight. Here in Malaysia is night already. It's about our work in developing a policy to reduce the salt content of food consumed outside the home in Malaysia, or what we call it as SALT OH. Next, please. So this project is funded by a local grant together with our UK partner under the Newton Grant Scheme. So as per Morocco, Malaysia also had a very high level of salt intake. It's almost double from the recommendation or maximum level set by the WHO. And this high salt intake has been linked to various diseases, including the high prevalence of blood pressure among the adults population in Malaysia. And our recent completed Malaysian community salt survey indicated that Malaysian adults to eat too much salt that can cause a heart problem. And most of them knew that they are eating too much salt, right? And more than half thought that they consume just the right amount of salt. And foods eating outside of home has been identified as the major causes or contributors of salt in the typical Malaysian diet. In fact, 70% of the Malaysian adults are consuming food outside home on a regular basis. And these food are most likely to be flooded with unhealthy components, including high salt intake. So thus we seem that there is a need to develop strategies or policies concerning foods consumed outside the home. However, little is known about the perception, readiness, motivation, barriers, and challenges faced by the relevant stakeholders. So in this project, we are actually looking into, before developing the strategies and engaging with the relevant stakeholders and conducting the the training of the trainers, we are doing the first step, of which we are looking into the stakeholder views towards salt levels in the out-of-home sector and what are the barriers to salt reduction in the sector. Next, please. Next, please. Thank you. So for this purpose, we have embarked on this one-year project. We started with the qualitative study, of which we are conducting a series of in-depth interviews and focus group discussion. And for this, we have developed a framework to come up with a questionnaire on the qualitative interview, looking into individual level, social environment, physical, macro level policies. And also we actually looking into the bigger picture from the theoretical framework. We are going to conduct the feasibility study on or evaluate the what we call the trial, the module that we're going to develop, and we're going to implement it once it's ready. Next slide, please. Well, this is our stakeholders mapping that we are going to for data collection at the moment. So we are going the whole country according to the region, which is the central, the south, the north, the east, and also the East Malaysia, which is the Borneo Island. So we have quite a large samples and a variety of stakeholders from the government and policy stakeholders, the NGOs, and also the researchers, the school sectors, the catering operators, food industry, street vendors, and also the consumers. The figures in red is the one that we have completed. All right, next. Well, today I would like to share with you some preliminary findings on our qualitative data. At the moment, we completed interviews involving 7 policymakers, 5 NGOs, 14 researchers, 10 catering or school canteen operators, 34 food industries, 4 schools and 5 street vendors, and also 21 consumers, basically from the central and the east coast. We managed to analyze the sub-themes to be shared with all the participants tonight, involving the policymakers and NGOs. These include the important ministries, not just the Ministry of Health, but also the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture and Food Industry, and also Ministry of Domestic Trade and Consumer Affairs, and a number of NGOs. Most of the respondents were females, and the age is about 40 years old. Next slide, please. So with respect to the salt consumption, we have actually some sub-theme has emerged that everybody agree that the salt consumption is high, and especially those eating out is very salty, but it is part of the culture. You know, it is not actually unusual to take high salt food sources outside there, and it is also a habit from young. And also the preserved food is being sold a lot outside there at a very cheap price. Flavor enhancer is being used more often nowadays. And without salt, it is not delicious. And of course, they understood that the issue with high salt related to chronic diseases and so on. The awareness about salt intake is what we call satisfactory, but not yet excellent. Right, next slide, please. How about the policy's perception on the salt reduction? Well, everybody agrees that we have to embrace on these salt reduction policies. Well, to our surprise, the Ministry of Education was very cooperative, right? They have their own plan with respect to healthy eating, including to encourage children to consume less salt. And some societies has actually embarked on their campaign for healthy eating, including reducing the salt. And most of them actually indicated the need for sodium labeling to be compulsory, of which it should be to be mandatory in Malaysia in the year 2022. And everybody agreed that Ministry of Health should take the lead, but they should actually speed up some of the strategies that has been outlined many years before. And they agreed that the salt target should be mandatory, right? Because voluntarily seems doesn't work so much. Of course, the industry would protest, but we have to give support to the industries, give incentive and so on. And we need to develop a committee involving various ministries to actually go ahead with the salt reduction strategies. Next slide, please. Well, some of the motivation given by the participants in these studies is like from the researchers, they are so enthusiastic in research to look into the technology to increase the product's shelf life if the salt to be reduced, right? And Ministries of Education are very supportive in actually developing a module to educate staff and students, school children, right? And some of the barriers of course, funding, which is currently limited for policy-based or applied research in the country. Most of the time, the fundamental research is being given a priority, right? And again, about the product shelf life is the concern. And at the moment, we are lacking in terms of expert with respect to how can we actually reformulate the food which is currently high in salt to make it lower, but without jeopardizing the shelf life. And we agree that teaching the population is starting from the young, as we should actually inculcate the low saltiness among the school children. Next slide, please. Well, as a conclusion, we are so pleased to see that the ministries and the NGOs and also researchers that we actually engage in this preliminary analysis are very positive towards the salt reduction strategies, and they perceive that this is very important. But to our surprise, it is not a priority for a few ministries or even for some of the researchers in the area, and some of them are still skeptical, not sure whether it's going to work or not. However, they are willing to collaborate as a team and agree that Ministry of Health should take a lead, but there is need pushing or more work to be done to ensure that all the action being actually outlined to be taken off very quickly. And there is a need to embark on recent technologies, research and development to increase the shelf life, including coming up with a suitable packaging, acknowledging the low salt products as premium products and so on, okay, when salt is to be reduced. Okay, next slide, please. Well, these are some photos. Well, we have a constraint during this pandemic in data collection, but we try at the best that we can, combining the virtual interview. Most of the virtual interview were done with the ministries, NGOs, and also some of the researchers. But we managed to actually went to the East Coast of Malaysia, of which the pandemic is not so bad, and we managed to meet up with the chief minister of one of the state in the East Coast, and he has expressed his interest to embark on this salt reduction strategies, looking into the East Coast food, which are very high in salt. For your information, at the East Coast of Malaysia, they have produced processed foods from fish, which is very, very high in salt. And very good news that recently we have received an interest from them to use a salt, what we call substitute, in producing that kind of product. We are also being invited in the committee by the Ministry of Health, like the Committee for Health Choice logo, of which we have spoken up to bring down the salt level in various food products in Malaysia. And our team has also been invited as a speaker in the Salt Awareness Week recently. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Shahar. It was wonderful to see preliminary results coming through from that study. Thank you for sharing. So we have time just for one or two questions to both you and Professor Deroche. So the first question is to you, Professor Dureish. How were the bakers made aware of the importance of reducing salt in bread?
Please, can you repeat? How
were the bakers, the people producing the bread, how were they made aware of the importance of reducing salt in the bread?
Yes, it was about the survey CAPE. My student in Casablanca, we awareness 1,200 bakers for the benefits to eat less salt for health. This about CAPE, knowledge, attitude, and behavior. Yes,
So you
of
involved all the bakers in that study.
It's a survey of WHO.
Okay, wonderful, thank you. And to Professor Shahar, what kind of salt substitute do they use on the east coast of Malaysia?
Well, they have not tried any salt substitute. So tomorrow I'm going to have a meeting with one of the industries that providing the potassium chlorides. So we're going to pilot whether we can do that. So our strategy when we go to all the states around Malaysia is to have a connection with the what called MADI, which is the Malaysia Research Development Institute, which is under the Ministry of Food and Industry, right? Which is outside from the Ministry of Health or Education that we normally work. And to our surprise that it is, we receive a good cooperation, and they realized that salt has not been the priority for that ministry for many, many years. So they said that they are looking into the low calories product and low sugar products and so on, but not low salt. So it's very good from the qualitative study that we've done with them. So they are actually coming up with this suggestion to try to use the what we call potassium chloride and salts, of which I'm going to have a meeting with the industry tomorrow. And we also, when we go to the states, also we engage with the universities, the local universities at the state, because when we want to get the buy-in from the chief minister, it's very important for us to get the local people, local universities, and so on. Then hopefully the chief minister of the east coast of Malaysia would actually fund this project.
Wonderful. I think that might be all we have time for, but thank you both for your presentations. I'm going to hand over to Lindsay now.
Thanks, Mary. And we'll have time for additional questions at the end.
Thank you.
I now have the pleasure of introducing our next two speakers. Dr. Hamdan Mohammed is a qualified dietitian working with the Ministry of Health of Malaysia and is part of a team of researchers from WHO Malaysia Country Office, the Ministry of Health of Malaysia, and the George Institute, who received a LINKS grant for sodium reduction activities in Malaysia. I'll introduce our next speaker after Dr. Hamdan's presentation. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. My slide, please. Okay, hi everyone. Good evening from Malaysia. I'm Hamdan on behalf of Ministry of Health Malaysia. I will share some efforts and outcome of our strategy for salt reduction in Malaysia, which some of the activities are still ongoing. All these are collaborative effort of Ministry of Health Malaysia, National University of Malaysia, World Health Organization, and also the George Institute for Global Health Australia. Next, please. Okay. To highlight a current situation in Malaysia, our National Health and Morbidity Survey 2019 found that 1 in 3 Malaysian adults have hypertension, in which half of those were undiagnosed and unaware of their disease status. Next, please. Next. Okay. From Malaysian Community Salt Study, My Cost 2019, we found that 4 out of 5 Malaysian adults actually took more salt than recommended. 3 out of 5 Malaysian adults assume that they consume an adequate amount of salt. It is important to note that more than 90% of Malaysian adults knew the negative effects of salt intake on their health. Despite that, half of them actually added salt, sauces, and also seasoning while eating. The average salt intake among the Malaysian adult population is 7.9 grams or 1.6 teaspoons per day. Next, please. Next. Okay, to accelerate national efforts to address NCD, Ministry of Health Malaysia had produced the salt reduction strategy to prevent and control NCD for Malaysia 2015 to 2020, which outlined 3 MAP strategies for Malaysia, which is monitoring to accelerate salt intake monitoring among Malaysians, awareness to increase awareness not only among healthcare providers but also in the general population with various target groups, and also in terms of product focusing on mandatory labeling of sodium and partnership with the food industries on reformulation of their products. Next, please. In October 2018, Ministry of Health and WHO had engaged the George Institute for Global Health to conduct a midterm evaluation of the strategy with a view to generate recommendations for strengthening the implementation of the interventions. The key findings of the evaluation are the barriers and facilitators that influence people in Malaysia in reducing salt intake. Those barriers and facilitators identified actually have been summarized in this ecological framework, depicting the multiple levels of influences divided into the macro level environments, including legislation, budget, and also culture, the physical environments or settings, the social environments, and finally the individual factors such as the difficulty to identify salt content in foods. Next, please. Next. Okay, sorry. Okay, from the evaluation, 3 key recommendations have been suggested. First one is to accelerate sodium labeling legislation for all packaged foods, which already gazetted, as mentioned by Prof. Susanna just now, and the enforcement will take place in 2022. The other recommendation is to monitor the sodium or salt content in foods eaten outside of home, and also to establish a communication strategy to strategically reinforce the salt reduction messages to the populations. Next, please. Based on the midterm evaluation's finding and recommendation, there is an effort by Ministry of Health Malaysia, academician, and also WHO to strengthen Malaysia's salt reduction strategy. Application for links grant has been put up and already received to embark on 2 specific projects, which are street food survey and also strategic communication, where the objective of the grant is to comprehensively analyzing salt level in street foods with a view to accelerate mandatory sodium labeling and to inform salt reduction education messages as part of a strategic communication plan, and also to engage food industries in reformulations of their products. Next, please. The street food survey actually will cover the whole region of Malaysia from North, Central, South, East, and also East Malaysia. Based on the preliminary results of the survey from Central region only, the top highest sodium content of foods from these 4 states, fried noodles, fried kway teow, noodle soup, curry mee, murtabak, and also apam balik with cheese. These are actually common street foods consumed by Malaysian, and the sodium content is very high, as you can see, up to 2,700 milligram per serving. Next, please. Next, okay. For strategic communication, the objectives are to identify successful or unsuccessful activities or strategies and how to strengthen and improve the strategies, and to produce health promotion educational materials involving communication media, either social media or traditional media, with the target audience of healthcare workers, children and youth, general population, at-risk population, parents, caretakers, guardians, and homemakers. This is a collaborative effort with the communication consultant, but the actual champion for this project actually are the volunteer champions from various categories of healthcare personnel. Next, please. In December last year, we ran a short social media campaign with existing health promotion materials. We choose Ministry of Health social media as the medium for campaign, as it has up to 4.7 million followers, which counted more than 10% of Malaysian population. And with 32 million population in Malaysia, it is interesting to see how the posting actually reached up to 700,000 people and engaged up to 17 people. In light of this, with communication strategy, we continue these efforts. Next, please. So the achievements to date for our salt reduction strategy, there are obvious achievements regarding monitoring, with several studies have been completed and reported. For the awareness component, extensive health promotion and education tools developed and published with a successful number of trainings, and promotion through mass media and also social media is still ongoing. What needs to be focused now is improve on reach. In terms of products component, we have achieved a target of 5 products annually to be reformulated. And we also already achieved mandatory labeling for sodium that have been successfully gazetted on 31st July last year, and will be enforced next year. Our next step is legislation to set a maximum target level of sodium in packaged foods. Next, please. In conjunction with World Salt Awareness Week 2021, we already had 2 major activities this month, actually. First one, we had a successful media engagement session led by our Deputy Minister of Health and key opinion leaders with members of the media in the country. There are actually extensive media coverage in all types of media, radio, TV, and print. On the 2nd of March, we already had a webinar for healthcare provider and the public, with a sharing session on key issues and main messages to reduce salt in daily life. The webinar have successfully engaged an impressive numbers of participants. Close to 10,000 people clicked to play the webinar video on Facebook Live, and also over 500 people joined us by Zoom platform. The social and traditional media campaign is still ongoing. Next. Okay, with that, we would like to thank all our collaborators and Resolve for this opportunity. With that, I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hamdan. Again, if you have any questions, please type them into the Q&A button as we proceed on to our next and final presenter. Dr. Nalika Ganawandana is a National Professional Officer for Non-Communicable Diseases and Health Systems at the World Health Organization Sri Lanka Country Office, and is the recipient of a LINCS grant to do sodium reduction activities in Sri Lanka. Over to you.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity. Am I heard, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, yes. What I'm going to present to you today is the progress of the activities we have been conducting in Sri Lanka support the government's national salt reduction strategy through a grant from Link. Next slide, please. Yes. Now, project comprised three objectives. We had three areas of work. Firstly, to develop a communication package to educate the public and to change their behavior to reduce dietary salt. Then secondly, to provide policy and technical support to the government to engage with the food industry. And thirdly, to develop food standards and guidance to promote healthy eating in hospitals and schools through settings approach. I will describe each of the objectives in detail. Next slide, please. Yes, so firstly, regarding the activity, to achieve the objective of developing educating the public on change in behavior to reduce intake of dietary sodium. Within these 2 years of project period, we have conducted three main activities. Firstly, we are conducting right now a communication package to commemorate the Salt Awareness Week 2021, of which the details I will tell you in a minute. Then we also we are right now designing a social media campaign to educate the general public on a front of pack label regarding salt. And also we are planning a national low salt cooking challenge, mainly to again educate public on how to change recipes to so that their dietary salt intake would be less. Next slide. Yes, this communication package to change behavior of public, which is being launched now within the Salt Awareness Week, actually was based on a survey that we conducted to assess the knowledge, attitude, and practices of dietary salt, especially among the adolescents and also the adults. And we had a qualitative component of getting an insight to what the owners and cooks of food establishment also think of dietary salt. So based on that was the basis for the development of the communication package. We have already also happy to announce that 2 manuscripts that have been submitted and are under review. Next slide, please. Yes, I'm just showing a sample of some products that as a result of this communication package, which we are using right now. We have a mix of social media posts, mass media campaign messages, video clips, posters, and actually this the products were developed through the Link project, but the communication package is being conducted by the Health Promotion Bureau of Ministry of Health, and they have embarked on a 360-degree campaign using the material that we developed through the project. And as you can see, these are some of the a glimpse of some of the products that have been developed through this project. Next slide, please. Yes, now the other communication piece that we conducted through this Link grant is to actually make people aware of the front of pack label that have come into act as a result of the regulation in 2019. As you see here, it's a regulation which mandates all the pre-packed processed foods to be labeled using a 3-color traffic light system. Next slide. Now, as we use here 3 colors, the combinations are actually 27. So we decided that we must give a simple way where people can interpret these 3 colors to make a healthy choice of a food. So right now we are working with a media campaign on how to interpret simply what these 3 colors mean so that they can use it to make healthy choices. Next slide. Yes, so this is our latest edition of activity which we are working on, again in the objective one of making public aware of the salt, dietary salt intake. We are looking at a national low salt cooking challenge, especially to make people aware of the importance of and ways of cooking common foods with less salt. If you know Sri Lanka, we are very fond of these dry fish meals which are like preserved in salt. So we have to make a way of like together with people we have to design a way of reducing the salt of these foods. So that's the kind of the most recent activity that we have embarked on, and we will be able to share more details in the future. Next slide, please. Right, so that was the public awareness activities. Then also through this link grant, we have embarked on some of the policy technical support level of activities with the government to engage with the food industry. And we have 3 activities: how we have supported the government to evaluate the effectiveness of the front of pack label, as you saw, and how we have initiated the government harnessing of key chain food restaurants to reformulate high salty foods in the country, and how we are working on setting a salt target. I'll let you know some details in the coming slides. Next slide, please. Yes, so with regard to this assessing the effectiveness, we have planned a pre-post assessment. As I told you earlier, this regulation came into effect in 2019, and we managed to do a pre-assessment of how the industry have complied with this regulation, and also the effect, to see the effect of market share and sales volume whether it will change based on this regulation. So as the pre-assessment, we included 4,239 food variants from 16 categories, and checking their compliance on how they have adhered to the label regulation and their sales volume. Because of the COVID, actually the enforcement of the regulation was postponed by 1 year. So we were planning to do the post assessment in 2021, but now we have to postpone it to 22. In the next slide, I'll show you some of the results very basically. Next slide. In our pre-assessment, which was done in 2019, before just before the regulation was introduced, 1/4 of the this category of foods actually contained the label, and I'm showing you of the 1/4 what the colors were based on the salt content. So already 1/3 of the foods which had the label were categorized as amber, and you see the levels there, and also about 18% were already categorized as red, and you see the amounts there as high salt. We also have are working on developing an online repository of the 4,239 front of pack label images that we collected as a part of this survey, so that the researchers can access and make use of this data. Next slide, please. Right, so about this, the advocacy meeting we had with the key chain food restaurants in Sri Lanka, the basis was we wanted to kind of get their engagement on the activity of trying to reformulate some food items which are mostly sold in these key chain restaurants, which would be also contain high salt. So firstly, we organized an advocacy meeting, identified 51 key chain restaurants. When we say key chain restaurant, we went by the criteria that they have more than 3 outlets running in the country, and restaurant owners from all the districts of the country were invited. The Ministry of Health took the lead in conducting this meeting. So we advocated with them about the health effects of high salt, and they all kind of like agreed that if their food items were found to be high in salt, that they would agree on a reformulation voluntarily. So with that, we conducted a laboratory analysis of mostly consumed food items, 15 mostly sold items in these restaurants. Can I see the next slide, please? Yes, I'm just showing one of the items that we have selected as to be reformulated, which are bread and bread products. So this is a result of this analysis we did. And you see the variation we see. So we saw wide variation of salt content in all foods, and we have now picked up bread and bakery products produced by these key food chain restaurants as an item that can be actually that has much high salt content, and an item which can be reformulated. Next slide. So taking on from there, now we are like, as we discussed and as the key food chain restaurant owners agreed upon, we are trying to design a strategy to set the salt targets for bread and bakery products. So we have actually called for expression of interest for an agency, a food technology with food technology expertise, to formulate a strategy, and our aim is to advocate for a targeted salt level with a timeline, and also give technical guidance to the through the experts of food technology to the restaurant chefs to reduce salt levels while maintaining the required quality parameters of bread and bakery products, and also to extend the assistance by conducting training sessions for the food industry to enrich in these targeted salt levels. So this is work in progress. Next slide, please. Right, so now I have come to the last objective of this link grant activities, which we promise to develop food standards and guidance to promote healthy eating in hospitals and schools. And we have these two activities going on. I'll describe to you them in the next slides. I must explain that we have picked up hospitals here because Sri Lanka, the government hospitals, offer care free of charge, and the package also includes meals. So there we have provision to actually make a change. So we did a review of the food procurement and provision processes in the country, and actually have this publication in the WHO repository. And we found that many actually the guidelines which govern the food serving in the government hospitals are in alignment with the WHO standards, but there are so many issues related to implementation. So because of that, we went ahead, and can I have the next slide, please? Then we also developed these documents that are shown here. Based on our findings, we developed a guideline to promote healthy eating in hospital settings, a step-by-step guide which can be used by the government hospital administrators to implement the already aligned guidelines that are issued by the government. So the issue is in implementation. So we realized this and develop this guideline to make this implementation early. And not only that, also we developed and offered them a monitoring framework to make sure that they can that the food that they serve in the kitchen and also in hospital canteens are in line with the guidelines, which are also in line with the healthy parameters of food items. And right now, those documents developed through this link grant I have been submitted to the National Advisory Committee of NCD of Ministry of Health. And upon their approval, they can be kind of implemented. Next slide, please. Yes, so that's an account, a very short summary of what we have conducted through the link grant to support the National Salt Reduction Strategy of Sri Lanka. Thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you for that excellent presentation and overview of your links grant. We're now going to launch into the Q&A session for all of the presenters. We can circle back to our first two presenters since we didn't get to that many questions. I would like to note that some of the responses have been typed into the Q&A button, so if we don't read your question out loud, it could have already been replied to. I will start with a question for Dr. Nalika. Did Sri Lanka consider the warning octagons for front of path labeling like the ones used in Chile or Mexico? And how was the decision made to use the warning labels that are currently being implemented?
Yes, are we talking about the traffic light system that is already in operation? Yes.
Yes.
Unfortunately, as I told you, though the regulation came into was designed and in 2019 and was kind of officially implemented, the government was requested for a 6-month, a grace period by the industry. Unfortunately, that got extended because of COVID, but right now from January 1st, 2020, it is in effect. But at the beginning, as I showed you, as the government were doing discussions with the food industry, 1/4 of the processed food actually had this label. And though I didn't show you, we also analyzed in this survey how each aspect of the regulation, whether they are compliant with each aspect, which was also not bad. About 95% of the labels, the foods that had the label also complied with all the aspects. But as I showed you, the salt content, as for salt content, they are quite high. So we must wait and see how, we would have loved to do this post assessment before the link grant activity, link grant complete. We complete the link grant in this year, but a recent technical working group meeting actually decided let's give 1 year of implementation before we do this. So this formal evaluation post assessment will have to be postponed, but we will keep an eye. And as I told you, we are also designing a social media campaign to teach people on how to use this 3-color traffic light. Thank you.
Thank you. And for our colleagues in Malaysia, Dr. Hamdan and Prof. Susanna, do you think it's enough for Malaysia to rely on the healthier choice logo to consider healthier food choice at the market, especially to those who have NCDs such as hypertension, etc.? Perhaps you can start with Dr. Hamdan and then Prof. Susanna.
Okay, to me, definitely it's not enough just to rely on the Healthy Choice logo. Healthy Choice logo is just one of the efforts amongst other efforts that have been put on to educate actually publics in terms of what is better. Definitely for those having NCDs problem like hypertension and so on, we still need to educate them, especially as a dietitian. Actually, we reach them in clinic or hospitals that to educate them that Healthy Choice logo is just better compared to the what is called so-called the similar product, but not definitely is good for those with the NCD problems actually. So still have to combine with other efforts to educate the people actually. Prof. Susanna, maybe?
Well, I also agree with Dr. Hamdan about the HCL. Because sometimes when we have the logo, that there is a perception that healthy food is not nice. So only those who are health conscious would actually go for the HCL kind of products. So one of the way that we are actually trying to do in Malaysia is also reformulation, of which without the HCL logo, that a specific food of which we would define what is the salt target and negotiate with the industries and try to reduce the level of salt over time without actually going for HCL and that kind of thing. And number two is about educations. I think we as the healthcare professionals, we have to effectively communicate about the hazard of salt for the population. Because to our surprise, if you still remember that we have included a number of various researchers from various backgrounds, food scientists, food technologists, nutritionists, dietitian, medical professionals, the health sciences. To our surprise, we are receiving a various kind of perception about salts. Some of the researchers said, what's wrong with salt? You know, if the professionals, scientific professionals themselves said that nothing wrong with salt, and flavor enhancers are so necessary, you know, necessary for food production and that kind of thing. So we thought, oh, the industries, the flavor enhancers industries are so fast and are so quick in actually what we call brainwash this type of you know, this kind of profession related to food productions. So a lot of work to be done in Malaysia, and it was a good experience when we engaged everybody in our focus group discussion outside from the Ministry of Health. Right, thank you.
Thank you. I know you've just touched on this a bit, talking about industry interference and even some within the scientific community questioning what's wrong with salt. But I wonder if others on the panel have other challenges that they'd like to share regarding the interventions that have been employed throughout your various projects. Like, what challenges have you encountered, and what are some mitigation strategies that you've employed? So when dealing with industry interference, how have you worked around or mitigated that challenge? Can open it up to Prof. Daruish. We haven't heard from you in a bit.
Excuse me, I don't hear there is a question?
Sure. The question was, what other challenges have you encountered with some of your sodium reduction activities, and what are strategies that you've employed to mitigate those challenges?
I don't speak slowly, please.
Oh, sorry. The question is, what challenges have you encountered with the sodium reduction activities that you've done in Morocco, and what were some of the strategies that you used to mitigate those challenges?
It's about a strategy in Morocco. Yes.
Any had.
There is a strategy in Morocco to reduce the factors of cardiovascular disease, and in this strategy there is salt and sugar and oil and fatty acid trans. But there is plan d'action of reduce action plan to reduce salt in Morocco, and it's the university. There is 3 universities in Morocco who work in this way. University of Casablanca, Hassan of Casablanca, University de Kenitra, and the University of another University of El Jadida. And in Casablanca, we produce result about reduction salt in bread, and we determine, and I determined the prevalence of the consumption salt in Morocco with the WHO. The level, the consumption, it's for adult more as it more 24, it's 17.8 gram per day, 8 per day. There is a plan of our Ministry of Health to reduce salt in Morocco. Thank you. It's okay?
Yes, thank you. Would any of our other panelists like to jump in?
Hi, Lindsay, this is Aruna. I'm from Ministry of Health, Malaysia. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to go back to the earlier question where someone asked about the HCL logo. And I'd like to add on to what Hamdan and Professor Zana had mentioned earlier. First, at Ministry of Health, I think there is no one strategy that works. And we know this from efforts from previously. And to be honest with you, we're new to this whole salt business. We're more experienced in terms of sugar. We're more experienced in terms of tobacco. So we're learning from those experiences and we're trying to apply those principles generally when it comes to either working with the industries or in terms of the awareness campaign or the monitoring. So obviously in Malaysia, from the experiences and from what you heard from the two speakers from Malaysia, we realized that in terms of monitoring, we've pretty much got that covered, right? We ran a national monitoring survey. We've got a very good basically a step survey to monitor disease per se, but it is the components where we feel that we're struggling with our awareness. And in terms of awareness, we know there's a lot of competing interests such as sugar and right now COVID. So just to reiterate, the reason we're focusing on social media, for example, is because Minister of Health in Malaysia has received a lot of attention in terms of social media work because of the COVID. So we've gained followers. We're one of the fastest growing social media in the country. So we're actually basically using that as like a platform to start promoting salt related work. So that's one. I think with the links grant, that's going to help us, and with working with a proper communication consultant, that's going to help us basically accelerate and intensify that work. However, we think no matter how much we do in terms of monitoring or awareness, moving forward 2021 onwards, our strategy is going to be focusing a lot on legislations. Like what Professor Zana said, we're trying to see how we can work to accelerate the efforts on setting mandatory sodium levels in certain processed foods. But in terms of challenges, not just, how would I say, it's not just industry interference, but convincing people in policy to say, hey, you know what, this works. And this is where evidence from other countries, such as the UK and all the other countries have actually gone ahead and set mandatory levels helps, So we're working on that, and we look forward to sharing more on that as we move forward. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thanks so much, Aruna. We're almost at time, so I would like to open it up for any additional comments. I see, Hasna, you've unmuted yourself. Would you like to say something? Hi.
Yeah. I basically would like to share some of the results from the food group discussion that we had with our food vendors. So it seems that our food vendors, they are very, especially for those who are more on preparing the traditional food, they are really like would like to actually sort of like they want to make sure that the food is the taste is the same as what been prepared by their parents, by their previous generation. So in that sense, it's quite difficult for them to actually reduce the usage of salt because they're afraid that that will actually, change the taste, and they were afraid that, the customer will not buy it because of that. So those kind of things that makes them the main challenge is that they would not like to, or they would not want to try to reduce the salt due to that, because they're afraid of the taste, and also they're afraid that the customer will not buy the food when the taste, the salt is different. So that's one challenge. But however, having said that, when we say that, if there is another alternative of salt, so are you interested to use it? So because they are not aware of the salt substitute, because like what Dr. Aruna has mentioned just now, when you talk about sugar, they know about the sugar substitute, but when it comes to salts, they are not aware of that. So I think it's more on the awareness, also on education, these food vendors basically. So that would work. But at the moment, that's the big challenge on how to change their mentality and how they think. So that is actually some of the result that we had from our group discussion with these food vendors in Malaysia. And also, if you notice that Dr. Hamdan have showed you the results of the sodium content in our food that we get from the street food, is actually containing quite high amount of salts, because we use a lot of, they use a lot of these sauces, and like oyster sauce or soy sauce in those noodles, fried noodles, and that what actually increase the sodium content. So you can see that those kind of food that have gravy in it was also contain high amount of sodium. So again, I think education is very important in this sense. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. We're at time, so I'll just wrap up a bit, and then I'll turn it over to Mary if you have any additional comments. But I want to just thank all of our presenters for these wonderful presentations. And I think Aruna sort of touched on the fact that we really need to learn from one another. And this is why Links was created. This is why we have these webinars, is really to share this information and disseminate the hard work that you all are doing to the world. And so we will be posting this webinar to the Links website and sharing the presentations. But if you, as a attendee, have resources that you'd like to share with the Links community, or have findings that you think we could help disseminate, please don't hesitate to reach out to support@linkscommunity.org to share your resources. There are some additional resources in the chat. I know that our colleagues from Johns Hopkins promoted the SALT course that they are working on, which Links will be sending out further information on. But thanks again to our presenters, and thanks to Mary and our colleagues at WASH for helping to coordinate this webinar. Mary, any final words?
Thank you, Lindsay.
Information, a little information. In Morocco, we have legislation to reduce salt in bread until 10 grams per kilogram on 2025. This is a legislation, and the baker must reduce salt in the bread.
That's wonderful to hear. That's a great initiative. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, thank you very much, Lindsay, to Links and to all of our presenters. Such a wonderful, engaging webinar, and I fully agree that collaboration is the way that we're going to be able to bring salt intake down, and that's really the purpose of Salt Awareness Week as well, to bring us all together and to share that salt reduction message. So yes, thank you everyone to joining as well.
Good day, everyone. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.